Kurt, you've been on this programme before,
Yeah.
Reverend. What on earth are you doing wearing a dog collar?
Yeah,
What on earth is the message of Jesus, the message of love? What is it that Jesus said that chimes with BNP policy? Do tell us.
Jesus wasn't British.
Okay,
and he was Jewish as well. It was Jewish as well, and given your past, Mr. Bronze, that might well be a problem.
Right, just a moment. Well, if I could answer, please. I think there is a danger of caricaturing the policies of the BNP, and it's very easy to knock down a caricature with an emotional tirade. Now, freedom of speech is properly exercised where both sides are allowed to give rational arguments both for and against. And when that happens, it's amazing how much clarity of thought is brought to the issue. Now, you've asked the question about the biblical basis for nations, and the Bible does, in fact, record God's will to divide the human race into nations, which is why we're all so very different this morning. And God's will is to preserve the nations, to give them the space and peace to seek him. And if you bring all the nations together in a cheek by jowl situation, this will tend to the atomisation of a cohesive society, and it will also tend to produce conflict, which is, of course, what some of the opponents of the BNP
Well,
are
some people would say this
with.
is ridiculous. This is Jesus in jackboots. This is ludicrous.
This is a caricature.
Another question I'd like to ask is, which theological college did you go to? Because, I mean, every church up and down Britain, I think without exception, has said that that is a load of rubbish, and has also pointed to the extremist and racist policies of the BNP. You know, that is just theologically incoherent, and I'm afraid not within any kind of Christian tradition whatsoever, with the exception of the churches in South Africa.
With all due respect, if you would read the Constitution of the Christian Council of Britain, we put the case there. But if you could read that and then interact with it and then give me your response.
How many members has the Christian Council of Britain got?
Rightness is not deemed by numbers.
Well, I'll tell you.
But let's go around the audience. Go on.
I completely...
Freedom of speech. They have a right to be heard. Isn't it good that we're hearing them this morning?
Yeah, I think, you know, we should celebrate the fact that we have freedom of speech in this country. There are plenty of other countries in the modern age that don't have it. And we should celebrate our rights, you know. Fair dues to you guys, you know, say what you want. But at the same time, you have to be transparent with your views. And, like you said, you have to engage in a debate with both sides of the argument.
But they don't think you're British.
We're happy to do.
But they don't think you're British.
I have to answer this. My father and my mother came to this country. They have contributed to the economy of this country, and you don't recognise them as British. To me, that is rubbish.
No, our definition of Britishness is an ethnic definition. And as you on your ethnic form probably identify yourself as Asian or something like that, we recognise that the British are an ethnic group, just like all the ethnic groups now living among us.
Right, you're English.
So that's on racial equality principles.
I was brought up in this country. My parents brought me up in this country. Okay?
Yeah,
and
well,
I speak English. English is my first language.
in fact,
I see myself as a British Indian. I have a British passport. My parents do as well. And I am proud to be British. What makes me any less British?
I'm confused. Where to go to? Hands up. You, Benjamin, in a minute. You first.
I think that there is a freedom of speech, and I think that people should have the right to put their backwards and forwards, and I think by opening it out, they'll be accountable for what they say, and that I think that we should trust the British people to actually put their cross in the right box during an election.
You're in a new situation now because you're being properly scrutinised. Do you welcome that?
Well, I don't mind that, but we're getting off the question, and we're not actually being allowed to answer the question about should the BNP have a right to be heard. My answer to that is everybody should have a right to be heard, not just the BNP.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another side to it as well.
White supremacists?
It's everybody who does not incite violence. That's the cut-off point. No, we don't.
What about hatred?
No, it doesn't.
Sorry?
What about hatred, he said?
What about hatred against other communities and dividing communities?
That's
not going to create a cohesive society for us.
People incite hatred against us. That hasn't been criminalised. The clear dividing line should be whether people are inciting violence. And if anybody doesn't incite violence, then they should have a right to be heard. But there's another side to it. It's not just our right to be heard, it's people's right to hear us. That's the important thing. And by taking away our right to be heard, you're not just taking away our right, you're taking away the right of all of you people. You might not want to exercise that right, but you have a right to hear what we say.
Amen.
Amen. Right, go on.
freedom of speech works two ways, first of all. When, for example, Abu Hamza comes on TV and he's inciting racial hatred, the BNP are up in arms and creating this fear of Islam, for example. And
Well,
really
Abu Hamza does a good job himself to create a fear of Islam,
He does,
doesn't
but then the BNP are doing exactly the same and inciting racial hatred, and it has to work both ways. And this kind of smokescreen that they hide behind.
But isn't it good to hear from Abu Hamza, and it's good to hear from Mr. Andrew Bronze as well? It's good to hear from both of them.
But do we allow it to the point where they're actually inciting racial hatred, which is exactly what the BNP are doing, going into areas like Bradford, where there is already kind of racial tension there, and really stirring up and leafleting and targeting these areas.
So argue with them, beat them by words. That's the best way to do it, isn't it? Isn't it the best way to do it?
But we're not inciting
can join your party then?
No.
Do you want to join their party?
I wouldn't want to join their party, but I couldn't anyway, because I'm not white, end of.
Well, it seems to be a question about something that doesn't arise. There isn't exactly a sort of queue of ethnic minorities wanting to join the BNP, so why ask about it? But we're still talking
about freedom of speech.
Yes, let's get back to this question of freedom of speech.
We're on it, don't worry.
Well, we're not. That's the point.
But we are.
People are veering away from
No, well, the very fact that we're listening to you now kind of defines it, doesn't it?
But I think the defining factor of whether somebody believes in freedom of speech isn't whether they want freedom of speech for everybody except. It's whether they want freedom of speech for everybody. And I say I want freedom of speech for everybody only unless that person incites violence.
Is it good that we are listening to the MEP and the vicar? Is that a healthy thing?
Yes, it is, and I think I'll say something quite controversial here, because I don't think there is a million miles between what some of the mainstream parties, the rhetoric that they use around migration and immigration, and some of the things that the BNP say about immigration and migration. In effect, we have racist immigration policies because we take certain people from certain countries in one part of the world and we refuse other people from certain countries in other parts of the world on the basis of their ethnicity or where they are born.
According to polls,
now, I'm
Jonathan,
saying there are different routes.
According to polls, most P-O-L-L-S, most people in this country are very, very worried and concerned about mass immigration because the country is changing. They think there has been too much of it, they think that it's been unfettered, and they're very worried about it. And a lot of those people voted for Professor Bronze because they feel that parties like yours... Are you not a professor, no?
No.
Well, he's a vicar, you might as well call yourself a professor. Just because parties like yours, the Conservative Party, have let them down, and the Labour Party have not said enough about those issues, Lewis Bagshaw.
I do think there's a problem with immigration. The Conservative Party has policy on immigration. To some extent, we're tied by the fact that we're members of the European Union, and we're tied by international law on who we can allow to be brought in. But there's a legitimate debate to be had about immigration. It does not include policies from the BNP about no non-whites joining the party.
1 million people have voted for them.
The BNP absolutely have a right to be heard. What they don't have is a right to be heard with respect. And I think it's really interesting that today the two representatives of the BNP here would rather do anything, absolutely anything, than discuss BNP policy and what it really means. They want to make this about their right to be heard. I agree they have a right to be heard. Why don't you talk about your actual policies and let's expose them to Britain? Because when people know about that, they will not vote for you.
I would be delighted to come back on another occasion, discuss policy, but that isn't the question of this debate.
You're running scared, mate. You're running scared.
No,
I understand why you are.
I
understand why you are.
I've spent all this week discussing policy with journalists and with the television.
You're fed up of discussing policy, are you?
No, I gave 8 different interviews. I don't run away from discussing questions on policy, but this debate is about freedom of speech.
Well, policy comes into it because we have to know what your policies are as to whether we consider that your policies are suitable to be aired, and freedom of speech means airing your policies and scrutinising them. So the two are intimately linked. What would you like to say? Good morning.
Reverend, that in order to take the speck, like the lug out of someone else's eye, you should take the speck out of your own eye, and it doesn't. Their policies don't exactly reflect what their religion teaches, and.
Well,
yes, but you
disagree.
You could say that about some people from your own religion, couldn't you? There are extremists and there are strange practitioners in all religions who take the
Bible does teach nations. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, but this is a nation as well, though, and
the nation is an ethnic group.
Benjamin.
Yeah. According to the Bible.
I just want to say Gordon Brown actually used the BNP slogan not so long ago. You know, British jobs for British workers.
He's not a member there.
He's not a member, but he helped get you some votes.
He did take
but
out...
I want to appeal to you as human beings, the so-called British people. I think you are anti-British. Yeah. Because Britain, by definition, has always taken in people, the Picts, the Celts, the Scillas, the Angles, the Saxons. Why did you go funny when it comes to the Jamaicans and the Pakistanis?
Yeah, but